Oh, for sake.
Now then, so Almouth, how are we doing? So for those who are waiting for the Master Orion hints and tips video that I started doing 6 months ago, I'm like 25% of the way through it. And I will do it. It turned out to be quite a bit bigger of a job than I'd anticipated, and then there was legs failure and got knackered and all such. Anyway, so someone I know said to me, how do you play Stellaris? So I figured I'm going to do like a tutorial video for the first starting, to explain all the shit that's going on, basically just to give an overview to the game that you're probably not going to get without doing 100 hours worth of play. Anyway, right, so new game obviously, except that my bod's in the way, but never mind. In fact, I'll shrink the sun down a little bit. There we go. It's probably more reasonable. Right, you can create as many custom races as you like, and to be fair, making a new custom race is probably the better way to do it. If you've got Alt DLC, which you probably got in the Humble Bundle sale, this is just before, this is like the week before Nemesis is released, so it's going to quite quickly become irrelevant, but most of the ideas should continue to exist. Right, pick whatever picture you want. That doesn't really make a difference. Name obviously doesn't make a difference. Name lists doesn't make a difference. Traits, here is where you are going to make a difference. Right, okay, so how important are each of the things that this will do? I'll go through them fairly quickly. Agrarian, early game actually really significant, late game completely and utterly useless. Ingenious, early game a little bit less significant, though still pretty damn useful. Late game very, very useful. Industrious pretty much averages out as useful throughout. Late game you end up being flooded with minerals anyway, but if you've got a lot of colonies, habitats, planets, etc., then to be fair, having an extra 15% is quite useful. Intelligent, late game very potent, mid game pretty potent, early game entirely arguable as to whether or not it's potent. If you're playing a tech rush, then yes, obviously very useful. Thrifty, trade value plus 25%, pretty much unignorable. Trade is incredibly powerful, at least it is right now. I don't know if it's going to get rebalanced in a week's time. Those obviously same kind of idea as intelligent. Extremely adaptive, right, so the higher your habitability, the higher the happiness of your pops on the planet. The higher the happiness of the pops on a planet, the more productive they are, the higher stability a planet will have. So whilst it's not a flat out 20% bonus to just outright raw production, it maintains a greater level of happiness of all the pops in your empire. Adaptive, again, the same. As you might imagine, that's why it's more expensive than the others. Non-adaptive, you can get around it late game, but early game it's pretty hampering, unless you're going for a specific kind of planet. I'll go into the Gaia world later on if I remember. Rapid breeders, growth speed, pop growth speed. Pop is where all of your resources come from. Yes, you do have like mining facilities and research stations in your that aren't living on planets and stuff that aren't coming from pops, but they're by the end of the game they're nowhere near as big. And your growth speed is how you ramp up your power spike. So slow pop speed would be quite hampering. Rapid pop speed quite good. Now it's only 10%. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it does actually make quite a difference. Leader level cap. I completely ignored leader level cap for a long time. I think it's only, is it 2% per level? As we get into the game you'll see what I'm on about. I think it's 2% per level that the leaders apply, but that applies to all produce on your planet. That's for your governors. For your scientists, I believe it's 10% per level. Not 100% sure on that one. Either way, +1 is big enough to make a difference early game, but if you don't take this, you can still get to level 10. Now, if you have probably, unless you're playing authoritarian and you want to be a very purist, which makes, to be fair, life a bit easier, then you only need one species to be good at level cap. Then all of your other species, you can decide not to take leaders from them. So you don't, if you end up being multicultural, having one of your pops that are talented is good enough. Although I'm pretty sure you have to leave your leaders, your starting race, sorry, available to make leaders. I'm pretty sure about that. Quick learners, again, experience gain plus 25% is actually quite significant. Slow learners is really quite hampering. I think that should probably be 2 and -2 personally. But you know, that's a good one to take for fairly cheap. Unity is, in my opinion, the strongest mechanic in the game, so plus 10% of that is very nice. It's not essential because it's from jobs, and a lot of your early game Unity, I would argue, comes from trade. Quarrelsome, I would argue, should never take that unless you're particularly confident and you know how to avoid its downsides, and you're not going to go for a Unity heavy game anyway. Empire Sprawl from Pops, 2 points for 10% Empire Sprawl reduction. Not worth it in my opinion. I would take the extra 2 points from having a higher sprawl from Pops. Pops do provide the largest sprawl, but 10% for 2 points is probably quite sensible. Take that one. Very strong. Army damage plus 40% is massive. Not in the fact that armies are particularly useful, because you can build just, you know, like 2k's worth of army over the course of the game. But early game particularly, it takes time to build an army. You know, what is it? Fucking, like maybe it's 6 months to build each one. Maybe it's a year. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. So the fact that you need much less army for the same effectiveness is where that comes, and you can build it much faster. The pop resource output is also very nice. Again, if you're multicultural, you can have a species that is very strong and select your army from that species specifically. So you don't have to necessarily waste it on your guys unless you're going to go for an early conquering. Strong compared to very strong, I would probably not take strong. I don't think it's beneficial enough. Weak, that's pretty hampering. Weak, I think that should be -2, because minus 2.5% resource output for your entire start is really quite hampering. The army damage side, not so much of a problem, but the actual resource output is a problem. Pop growth and immigration and resettlement, if you're even resettling people, forcibly resettling them, spending energy credits to do so, that is fairly useful. Pop growth from immigration, less useful if I cover what I'm going to talk about when we get into the actual game itself. It can be very useful. Arguably, I think that should be higher than 15% myself, but yeah, that's it. Similarly, that is pretty much a free point. If you're not paying to resettle your people, then most of the debuff from that is you know, free. And from immigration, 15% lower immigration speed. I'd take that. I mean, I don't know the exact mathematical calculation. I believe it's you will have immigration from one planet, and if the immigration from that planet is minus 0.4 pop growth, then it would be plus 0.4 pop growth on another planet, and then you get the 15% on top of that. I think that's how it works. So it should actually be quite useful. but I'm not 100% sure about that. I rarely ever rely on immigration to grow my pops. Communal pop housing using -10% is very useful, certainly late game, and when you're on habitats, definitely useful. If you're finding planets that are very small, so you know, like 10 to 15 sort of district sizes, then housing usage can be very useful. I mean, like when you've got, say, 100 pops on the planet, which is what you want to be aiming for, you can go up to about 150, but it starts getting very crowded. 150 has to be a very big planet. Then you're only really building one less city for pop housing usage, but the point at which you have to build it less frequently. You know, what you've got overcrowding, and you get one clerk job from building a housing district, unless obviously you get buffs and then you increase that to 2 later on. But you don't necessarily want to be building that city, the city district, if you can avoid it, because you want to get the resource rather than the clerks. Now I'll go into balancing of that later on when we get into the game as well. Solitary, I wouldn't call that a free point. You will find it hurting you after a little while. Charismatic amenities from jobs, very good, very good. If you find, particularly if you take repugnant, but if you find yourself relying on gene clinics to provide most of your amenities for fledgling colonies, certainly, charismatic is a huge help. Yeah, it doesn't seem like a whole lot when you're only getting 10, but also clerks provide amenities. Conformist, governing ethics attraction is very strong. You don't have to take that one because you can take one vision as an ascension perk, which is plus 50% and you're stronger. Oh, at least I think it's plus 50%. But the governing ethics attraction defines how people are in your factions, and how people are in your factions defines their happiness, and happiness defines stability, and stability defines the actual output of your planets. So that is like the bottom route of how to get a more productive empire. To increase productivity with the same number of pops is to have good ethics attraction to your government, to your ruling state. You can feasibly adjust the ethics orientation of your people and of your governance. We're going through policies and changing them and such forth, but you find that they end up arguing with each other and you can't please everyone. Deviance, I would avoid that if you can, but as you'll notice, that's 2 for 30 and -1 for 15, because -30 is really hard, really difficult. Venerable, leader lifespan plus 80. You can see it's 4 points. Your leaders are potent. If you have a high level leader die and you've not got a whole lot of resources coming in, all of a sudden you'll find that you've actually got a massive shortage of resources because you were relying on that. Venerable, the game typically is going to be about 300 years long. 8 plus 80 years is a very long time. Enduring, less useful. 20 years is enough, but less useful. Venerable will mean that typically your leaders are going to start dying around, if you've got high tech at least, they'll start dying around about the time that you start getting the repeating tech for their lifespan increasing anyway. So Venerable, you can get to the point where biological pops are leaders, at least, are not specifically dying. Fleeting can be a nice point to pick up if you know that you don't specifically want this pop to be your main source of leaders. Like, so you can start with syncretic evolution, so you can have another pop on your planet, and you can give that population fleeting, knowing that you're not going to be taking leaders from them, and then it's a free point. Decadent, work happiness and slave happiness. Minus 10% is basically minus 10%. Happiness is a percentile figure. It's not that they are 10% less happy than they would be. It is that they have minus 10% to that 100 to 0 figure. That is pretty nasty at times. Obviously, there's no particular happiness example there. I can go into slaves later on. Resilient, defense army damage plus 50. Very useful for subordinate species. Less useful for your main species, to be honest. If you're not very good at the game and you find you're getting invaded a lot, or if you're playing on very high difficulty and you're getting invaded a lot, it can be incredibly useful because it can defend your planets quite easily, but I wouldn't necessarily spend the point myself. Pop consumer goods upkeep minus 10%. Mid game to late game, incredibly potent. Like when you've got pops of like maybe 2,000 pops in your empire, and you're using, I don't know, like maybe 800, 900 consumer goods upkeep in them, and that's, you know, fairly low level as well. To have suddenly reduce that by 10% is a swing of 90 consumer goods. That's huge. I'm playing a game at the moment with the blah 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 communist styles, and the main species is using utopian abundance and everyone else is using shared burdens, and that is that 10% change when I put that on my prime species was about 150 point swing. It was huge. Wasteful, that is really going to hamper you early game. My -1, it's probably not really worth taking that. Right, so I'm just going to create a species here for the sake of it. As we're not going to be going very long, I'm going to take rapid breeders, ingenious. Okay, so -2. Where are we going to get those -2 points from? For the sake, because it's going to be fairly early, I will take non-adaptive, so I can show you the way in which it's deceptive. I will take that. And I'll leave it at that, I think. You want solid? We'll take weak and we'll take nomadic. See whether or not we have enough time to force science it. Okay, homeworld doesn't really matter. Right, so there are 3 classifications of planet. You have, I think it's 80% habitability, and then 70 on the other 2 that are in that class. And then, or maybe it's 70 and then 50, maybe 70 and 60, can't 100% remember, we'll find out. And then on the other 2 classes you will have, I think it's 25% habitability on all the others. Off the top of my head, not 100% sure, but fair enough. Doesn't really matter, that's just pictorial.
Oh, for sake.